Hello everyone, welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. In today's Doctor Who Big Finish review, I'm taking a look at The Box of Terrors, a bonus audio novel to celebrate 60 years of Doctor Who. Now, I have reviewed a previous audio novel, Scourge of the Cybermen, with the third Doctor and Sarah Jane. I will leave a link in the description below to that review so you can check it out. I've got a few other of the audio novels, like Emancipation of the Daleks, which is a 12th Doctor and Bill story, which feels like it should be the Monk trilogy, but with Daleks. It's an amazing, a great little audio novel, and I'd love to review that at some point. And I've got The Dying Star, and of course, The Box of Terrors, today's review. But before we dive into the review, if you like your Big Finish content around here and you're new, then please do consider hitting that subscribe button because there's plenty of Big Finish content coming up in the near future. We do news, reviews, and streams, and much, much more. So, the Box of Terrors, if Once and Future wasn't enough to build up the hype for the anniversary, we had the announcement of a bonus audio novel to continue the anniversary love and celebrate our favourite show. But before we dive into the story itself, you might be curious about what are the audio novels? Well, they are enhanced audiobooks with sound design and music with one narrator, and in a way feel like the modern equivalent to the Virgin Missing Adventures and BBC books, meaning that these are more leisurely listened, meaning you can get immersed in the prose of the story. Now, with this adventure being a six-parter and running just shy of 9 hours, there's a lot to unpack, and I mean a lot to unpack. So I'll give you the basic rundown of this epic story. We'll begin the story with the third Doctor and Sarah. Well, technically, I'm lying there, but the story begins with the third Doctor and Sarah. But I want to keep this review spoiler free because it starts with another character, which, yeah, I'm going to stay stum. But for now, believe me, it starts with the third Doctor and Sarah. As the third Doctor and Sarah follow this strange comet to Earth after being framed for the destruction of an entire civilization. So yeah, quite a bold statement there. Well done, third Doctor. So that's basically sort of the first part of the story. Then we move to the fourth Doctor, who is trekking across the desert with his Sarah, and they're accompanied by various alien dignitaries heading towards something called the Sandbox Beacon, which are guarded by various mercenary forces from Desert Ogrons to Rocket Men. This story really does expand on these Big Finish original characters, especially sort of get some great moments with Sarah Jane in the latter half of the story. As for the fourth Doctor and Sarah and the ever resourceful Sergeant Benton investigate why these sort of beacons are failing and what is this mysterious sandbox that can unleash untold horrors upon the universe, the third Doctor crashes the party literally by crashing his TARDIS in the desert, meaning that they are both forced to work with one another. But who wants to unleash the horrors of the sandbox? Well, it's Omega, of course. He's on the cover, with him trying to become corporeal in our universe and break out of his antimatter realm. So it's a good job we have two Doctors on the case. Pairing the third and fourth Doctor, my two favourite classic Doctors, feels like a genius move, as I don't think we've had a single story in expanded media with those two. So it feels quite like a nice little refreshing thing to have those two Doctors meet, because obviously Big Finish sort of favour, the 80s Doctors meeting up. We've had Daughter of the Gods with the 60s Doctors meet up. So I feel like this was sort of the last sort of glaring sort of decade Doctor pairing, really. It's really captured the dynamic beautifully of these Doctors, as they really don't get on. I feel like Lizzie Hopley's really wrote John Pertwee and Tom Baker with sort of the clash of egos, as we sort of have the third Doctor's pride and intelligence shines brightly and is somewhat sort of put off by the toothy grin of his successor. And that seems to accompany so many of his statements, and he develops a deep respect for the more bohemian Fourth Doctor's methods as he realised that they share much more in common than he initially thought, but they have some common goals, to stop Omega and to rescue Sarah. But can they work together to stop the hell of the sandbox being opened? Now, this is not just a multi-Doctor story, it's also a multi-villain story, but on the cover you'll notice it's a multi-Sarah Jane team-up, which could prove tricky trying to define both versions of this character, but Lizzie Hopley tackles the issue with such ease, no confusion at all, using Sarah Jane for the younger version and Sarah for the older version. Now, the two Sarahs dynamic is really fascinating, as the two Sarahs can't touch, otherwise, who knows what will happen? I think it's sort of the Blenovich effect. So there's sort of a constant danger and threat, and how Hopley shows the subtle differences in characterization is brilliantly done, with a hint at the growth and experience Sarah's gained during her time with the Doctor. With the elder Sarah takes on something of a sisterly or even sort of motherly role as she supports her younger self, which is very heartwarming, and there's faith in each other and in the Doctor, and even if they neither sort of fully understand the situation around them or guides their actions, that they are so grounded in their moral fortitude, allowing for both of them to have a wonderful agency throughout this story. Though this being a multi-Doctor story, I feel the heart of this adventure is Sarah, as this story, especially in the latter half of the story, reminds you why Sarah Jane is the Who girl. And it feels like a celebration of her character, with this being sort of her 50th anniversary in 2023, and this story really honours her. Now, this being a third Doctor story, it wouldn't be complete without some political aspects, as we have the member of VAST, which is a council of time-sensitive beings in charge of the Sandbox, and its beacons are in disarray, with Lord Barusa leading the solution while the beacons start failing, and the Sandbox sort of ripples can be felt across the universe, which gives this story a flux-like feel as sort of the universe sort of starts to sort of unwind and unravel, which is very grand and epic. And as the final beacon fails, the Sandbox is open. Now, the Sandbox is a great sort of traditional Pandora's box, and is a really sort of neat idea. It's a prison holding the most despicable criminals and beings in the universe, so it's another version of Sharta. But who does Omega want from the Sandbox? Well, I shall keep that a surprise. Once the Sandbox is open, it allows the story to really ramp up the apocalyptic feel. The criminals are unleashed and are vying for sort of human form, and they're taking on living sand, becoming these dust devils, and we have the rocket men sort of flying through them, which is really exhilarating stuff and quite tense, having sort of Sarah at the center of it, which allows for one monumental final showdown between Omega and the Doctor and another villain. Like I say, I shan't spoil that for you. All leading to a rather electrifying cliffhanger. This story does wrap up nicely and everything is put back into the Sandbox, but the story does end on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So maybe we could get a sequel to this adventure in the future. Now, I must talk about Jon Culshaw, as when you have a reader like him, every character feels so distinct and unique, from differentiating the two Sarahs to his iconic Tom Baker and his rather magnificent Jon Pertwee, to his Stephen Thorne Omega, brilliant, really does capture that booming grand present, and the story really allows for more of a ruthless Omega, as we explore more of his backstory and why he's full of vengeance and one big ego, and why he is a threat not to be messed with. Overall, this story feels like one big epic Sandbox with all your action figures in. And isn't that what an anniversary special should be? All your action figures together in making the most outlandish story. This story feels like a love letter to 70s Doctor Who, with it being a what if Doctor Who had a 15-year anniversary. But the prose aspect feels like it's a homaging the Target books, and I'm sure this grand adventure would make Terrance Dicks proud. I will say this story is a bit of a slow burner, but it soon finds its stride. At times in the middle of the story, it might get a tad messy, but when you're juggling a universe-ending story, some elements might seem to slip through the cracks and feel sort of forgotten about and reoccur quite late on within the story. But despite those sort of negatives within the story, I think that this is a real treat. Not only celebrating Doctor Who, but the ever magical Sarah Jane. I think that this is a great tribute to Elizabeth Sladen and Sarah Jane as a character, and is a great addition to the multi-Doctor catalogue. And it's doing something very different, putting these two 70s Doctors in a very sort of traditional 70s story, but sort of times it by 10, and you've got this grand epic apocalyptic sort of movie. The music feels very sort of Malcolm Clark-esque, very sort of like the Sea Devils in places, so it really feels like it's replicating the 1970s brilliantly. So I would give the Box of Terrors a well-deserved 8 out of 10. A great way to spend 8 hours of your life, really, with some great Doctor Who anniversary goodness. So thank you very much for watching this Big Finish review. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for plenty more Big Finish related content coming up in the near future. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.